is going on. And to discuss that with us, I have from the government, from the Uganda Media Center, keeps correcting me, from the Uganda Media Center, Executive Director and Frontliner, Ofono Opondo. Very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you, Charles. Good evening to our viewers.
From Kanyandahi Village, in Utete Sub-County, Barasha County, Kaurel District, I have the old man of the clan. He's also Chief Executive Officer at the Independent, Andrew.
And also
Mwenda.
Colonel General of the UPDF and RDF. Why do you forget that?
Colonel General, you started some rebel group that we don't know what happened to.
In 2007, come to Kanyadahi for peace talks. That's how I became a Colonel General.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you on the front line.
My pleasure to be here.
All the way from Kabale, we have the Honorable Minister, Misuse. He's the acting Minister for Finance. Very nice to have you, sir.
It's a pleasure being here. Actually, Kabale and Rwanda.
Kabale and Rwanda.
Yes.
Yeah, Kabale kids are supposed to be Kabale, the old one. When
Yes.
you create Rwanda, you create those other things.
It's a pleasure being here, and good evening to all the people viewing us.
Very nice to have you. And from Kira Municipality, from the Forum for Democratic Change, and the frontliner, the Honorable Ibrahim Ssemujju Nganda. Honorable Ssemujju Nganda, most.
Thank you, Charles. He's also a member of the Misrata Brigade.
The man is from Chazanga. He only represents.
I always have trouble when you're not on the show. People ask me what we have done not to have you on the show. So I need you to first explain, when you're not on the show, what happens? Where are you?
I am fully employed by the Parliament of Uganda. So sometimes I go to do parliamentary work. Last week I was in Teso. With the Committee on Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, we were interviewing people who are supposed to be compensated who lost cows. So it will happen sometimes because of the nature of my work. Because once I'm deployed to the Parliament, I have to be on the move.
Very understandable. So the people have been asking, or who keep asking me questions on Twitter especially, you've had it from the Honorable Ssemujju Nganda. The Honorable Winnie Kiza is unable to join us this evening, but we are sure she'll be with us next week. But we'll have another guest I'll introduce when they make it into the studio. President Yoweri Museveni has today, the 13th of October, 2022, signed into Acts of Parliament 3 bills. Some of them, especially one of them, is a bit controversial. There are actually 4. This is a statement from State House dated today, Thursday 13th, 2022. And it's titled, President Museveni signs bills into law. President Museveni has signed 4 bills into law. And these are the Physical Planners Registration Act 2022, the Kampala Capital City Amendment Act 2022, the Mining and Minerals Act 2022, and the Computer Misuse Amendment Act 2022. The 4 bills were recently passed by Parliament of Uganda, and we are awaiting President Museveni's assent, and now their laws. We'll restrict ourselves to very brief comments on the Computer Misuse Act because it's attracted a lot of debate, but I encourage people to read the other laws as well and give the opinion about it. Let me start with you, Honorable Ssemujju Nganda. Now this is law. We did discuss about it briefly when Parliament passed this bill, the amendment to the Computer Misuse Act.
First of all, the law called the misuse of computer was in existence. So the Honorable Nsereko, the MP for Kampala Central, simply brought an amendment. And I think the aim was to regulate the use of social media, and then he sought to give more protection to privacy. I disagreed with the law. I didn't share the motivation for it, especially because the introduction to the existing law, a fine that was of 300,000, it will now be at 10 million. A sentence of 1 year and a half now is gone up to 10, 15. And because even the Computer Misuse Act itself, even without this tightening by the Honorable Nsereko, was being misused by the state. In my own views, giving them more ammunition, because it's tightened the offences and the fines, and I think social media wasn't properly covered under the law. It is now covered, so almost everybody is going to be a suspect. Because if you look at people who have been arrested, and some of them tortured even before they are produced before courts of law, sort of activists, not ordinary people who are using social media. And because, you know, one of the functions of the media, and social media is part of the wider media, is mobilization. I think the state and Mr. Museveni and almost all the because social media was used in Egypt to organize the anti-Mubarak rallies. It was used in Libya. It was used in Sudan. Each time we have had elections here, social media is going to be switched off. So this law finds a state that has an appetite to gag social media users the same way it has had appetite to, and then it has an element, I think, in my view, that seeks to reduce the publication of false news, which Andrew and I think Obo successfully petitioned against the courts of law. It is being smartly introduced under this amendment. So if you are trafficking in falsehood, as they term it, you are going to face those charges, and those sentences are waiting. So I don't think the law is going to help, because they sugarcoat it to say we are going to protect children, we are going to protect people who are fabricating and spreading falsehood. But the intention, you can see, is a law that already has. In fact, one of the proposals that Parliament dropped was that if you committed any of the offences that I have mentioned, and you cannot run for public office for 10 years, that Parliament dropped. Because it had been proposed. Because it was affecting its own interests.
And let me come to you quickly. What is the value add by this Nsereko law?
First of all, you know, I don't know what the law says. And you're ambushing me, I would have had to read and explain it. And I don't even know what the amendment is seeking to add to the law.
I thought Ssemujju had just run through a few of them.
Yes, but my own sense is that it's very difficult to know the intentions of government. But anyone who followed the 2016 election in the United States and the way Facebook and other social media were used to influence the campaign through the spread of fake news and misinformation, what we are beginning to learn, in fact, is that certain social media tools can be used to undermine even the democratic process. They can be used to even foreign actors can use them to manipulate electoral outcomes. If you look at the role of Cambridge Analytica, I don't know whether you... Yes. So I think that the first thing, instinct of many people is to criticize the governments, because governments always may have ulterior motives, is to criticize them on the suspicion of that ulterior motive. But even Ssemujju, you should be very careful about these new social media tools that we have. There is a very good book you could read on this. It is called Democracy Hacked by, what is the man called? Something More. M-O-R-E. And it deals with how these companies go to Google, Apple and others, and Facebook and Instagram, and they buy your data. So they made about so many data points on which on the election day they can target particular people, particular groups, because you know these companies that sell data like Facebook, they know more about you than you do about yourself. They know what you buy, they know whom you like, what you like, whom you communicate with, whom you befriend, because you know you go and befriend people whom you follow. They have so many things they have been studying using the algorithm about your behavior. Then they know if I am a politician with the name of defeating him, I can go to them and target particular social groups within his constituency and send a message that he has pulled out of the election. Because remember that what the social media does is to create micro communities. These micro communities where a small circle of friends, and then these big data companies will have studied the particular characteristics of people in a particular community, so they can say he has pulled out of the election, he has no charge, he's going to be arrested, and distort the outcome. So any Computer Misuse Act is important to address those issues, and Western democracies are coming also to recognize that the democracy itself cannot protect itself from things like this. So how do you use the law to ensure that you limit the damage that is generated by the manipulation of data algorithms, at the same time not undermining the positive contributions that these social media tools actually give us? So the law must be understood in that context.
I hear you. Actually, listening to you explain, I'm just wondering how much you go into very important detail to explain what needs to be done. I am suspicious of how much research, how much interrogation to find solutions to what you're talking about, because when you look at the law as it is now, it targets the small person who is sending or forwarding a message. Some of it might be most positive, some of it might be negative. I don't know if we have the capacity or Parliament invested sufficiently to create the capacity to deal with what you're talking about instead of stopping people from speaking.
So that's why I was explaining to you that while there may be a very important reason and justification why government should be careful and use law to try to create discipline on social media, government also have ulterior motives. So they may not write a law to address the issues I am raising. They may write a law to get even with those who are criticizing them. And in the process, they may even lose the big picture of what I am talking about.
Given our embracing of social media, both in government and outside of government, and number two, that we are not contributors to the technology that develops the algorithms and does the analysis. Can the promoters of this law survive it? You think? I mean, everybody's tweeting, from the president to the prime minister to...
I'm told the law is supposed to be blind. Therefore, the people who make the law, members of parliament, I expect them to enact the law in that blindness, that they really they shouldn't care whether subsequent to enactment the law will catch up with them if and or when they commit an offense. So I don't think that should be about the member of parliament, where the law will catch up with them, because then they would pass no law at all. Two, there is a phobia the media drive. The media and largely members of the opposition, each time we bring laws like this, I have said on this show before, when we brought the registration of persons bill, the one of NERA, ID card, you, the media and the opposition, said it was going to enable government to follow you up. I want to know how many people have been followed up, victimized, basing on the details they gave for identification, national identification, registration. When we said we are amending the Election Act to have biodata, your face on the National Voters Register, again you said you want to identify us so that you know how we vote. I want to know how many voters have since been trailed on account that their faces are now known. You remember when we asked to register for the telephone mobile, there was huge resistance and hullabaloo. When they eliminated scratch card for airtime, you remember the hullabaloo? So I think you're trying to drive a phobia, and Honorable Ssemujju is now an expert, especially now the fact that he's a member of parliament, well believed, even sometimes when he's sowing falsehood, and paranoia. Thirdly, from the framing, he has said government. And yet, at the beginning of the introduction, he said the amendments were moved by a private member, Honorable Mohammed Nsereko, who all of us know his political tendencies. He tends towards opposition leaning. Is Honorable Ssemujju yourself suggesting that the executive feared bring this amendment and use the Nsereko? I don't think so. There's no reason why this government, the executive, would have feared to bring. The president has simply concurred, agreed with what Parliament has passed. Because it's not just now in Nsereko. The entire Parliament, majority of members of Parliament passed this bill. So it is a parliamentary bill position. So the president in this time has concurred with Parliament. The fourth area is their abuse.
I was very happy.
Is there abuse of computer use, of media use, of social media use? Yes. And who are you calling small? Many people you call today small in Uganda, you yourselves call them social media influencers. Are they still small? But let us also copy from the democracies that we admire. Last year, we all remember, not even last year, a year and a half ago, we all remember that the President of the United States was banned from certain platforms. Twitter and I think Facebook. Facebook was banned permanently. This one was suspended indefinitely. Up to today, he's not on Twitter. Why do we think that American technology firms, media firms, can go to the extent of banning a sitting president because of the impact negative impact was creating? Only a month and a half ago, while our Parliament was discussing this computer misuse, President Joe Biden spoke publicly and said, I think it is time that we address the consequences of social media abuse, including intimating that he would consider bringing legislation. So why do we think our emerging democracy is any different or should be any different from those other places?
The contradiction I find, Mr. Pondo, is that America, which creates these social media platforms and elsewhere, there's a lot of talk about the role Telegram is playing in Russia at the moment, because it's the medium of communication many people are using, has actually not created the laws you're talking about. They have countered them other ways. President Trump was banned from Twitter. He created his own platform called Truth Social.
No. But the point is, do they ban? Do they suspend? Yes. And I think...
So is this... Why is the solution a law?
I think, you see, the developed democracies, because they are also powerful economically in the world and militarily, they use double standards. When it suits them, they call it free and fair. They now even have a new terminology, international rules. What are international rules in the world? They are rules enacted by America, by the G7, by the European Union. When they call them international, you participate in drafting them and enacting them, but you follow them because they are the most dominant. Their narrative is the dominant narrative. Do we want to say the dominant narrative is always the correct one? Absolutely not. And so I think it's necessary to regulate. The only good thing about it in Uganda and elsewhere is that the laws also create remedies for possible abuse and avenues for it. And I think for me, that is the most important point, that if the government or any other powerful person wants to harass a social media user, there are avenues for seeking redress and obtaining remedy.
I need to give the Honourable Minister enough time, so we'll take a quick commercial break. We'll be joined by another panelist here. But personally, I don't understand the use of a hammer to deal with to treat every problem as a nail. We'll be right back. The NBS Frontline, and we've been joined on air by the Honorable Nabagabe Flavia. She's the woman member of parliament for Kasanda district, and she's also the chairperson of the Women's League in the National Unity Platform. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good evening, viewers.
We were discussing a little bit about the Computer Misuse Amendment Act that was signed into law by the president today. They call that assent by the president. And these are the remedies proposed by the law as has been passed. It says under Section 3, the Computer Misuse Amendment Bill seeks to address the gaps that have been identified in the current law by A, enhancing the provisions on unauthorized access to any information or data. And I hope you're listening, because you challenged some of these in your career as a journalist. Prohibiting the sharing of any information relating to a child without authorization from a parent, guardian, or any other person having authority to make decisions on behalf of a child. When Parliament passed this bill, there was that video of a mother brutalizing their own baby that was circulating on social media, and people focused a lot on that and said, would this be wrong? But this says you need to get consent of the parent.
But the parent who is brutalizing the child to consent us publicizing it? Because it is on the basis of that in fact the police arrested this lady.
Absolutely.
How can you ask an abuser of a child to give permission to expose her abuse?
Now that's the person I described as a small person. What happens when it escalates to a person with authority who is abusing the authority?
Please go on.
Subsection C of 3, prohibiting the sending or sharing of information that promotes hate speech or sending or sharing false, malicious, and unsolicited information. So every forward of a WhatsApp message is problematic if you can't authenticate it. D, restricting persons convicted of any offense under the Computer Misuse Act from holding public office for a period of 10 years.
That was dropped.
That was dropped.
Yeah.
And revising certain offenses and penalties to make them stringent.
I see Charles reading with the glee.
Pardon?
I can see you reading with the glee the offenses, even the ones that were dropped.
Are you reading the law or the bill? Are you reading from the bill or the law?
I have both, the law and the bill.
It's better we focus on the law.
Yes.
Yeah,
Honourable Minister, I wanted to come to you on this law. Why does government want to treat every problem as a nail and you need a hammer to deal with it? I just referred to what O was talking about. When Twitter banned President Trump, he created Truth Social. They sought themselves out. The contest is there.
Well, we live in a country where there is nearly freedom of everything. But that does not mean that we take this freedom out of context. I have been asking a number of friends. Some people seemingly have a right to abuse others. Why should you spend the whole of your time abusing Misuse on social media? And my job, because I am an MP, I am not supposed to comment or reply. That's the advice they normally give us. So in these circumstances,
you must be hiring the wrong
hazard as a public official.
Yes.
In any case, how do you define abuse? You see, somebody can criticize you, say you have abused me.
No, there is a difference between criticism and abuse.
So who defines abuse? But the second thing is, as a public official, I think you should be. These are occupational hazards. You should be worried.
Why should you say I am alive? I am dead when I am alive.
Then you show yourself up.
So when someone says you're dead, you actually die?
You can imagine the law says, if I announce Misuse dead,
Yes.
it takes me to court 10 years in jail.
Why should you say I have stolen money when you don't have evidence?
So what if
Let me assume, I don't have evidence, but I'm assuming I made evidence.
If you have made
Yesterday there was a story on television and in the newspapers that a person went to hospital with an accident and they stole his kidney. This morning I read an explanation from the hospital, and it turned out that the guy, I think, very likely was born with one kidney, and that they cut his stomach to get fat to fill the part of the brain. But I think the journalists had done the story in the honest belief that it is true, because the guy had an accident on the head. He went to hospital. When he got out after the surgery, they had cut off his stomach, and the side of the stomach where they had the cut is where the kidney was missing. So the situation, and when they called the doctor himself, he refused to talk. I think he pressed busy.
No, I think just to add, Andrew.
So there they published wrong information, but in the honest belief that was true, because there was overwhelming circumstantial evidence that this is true. It turns out to have been false. So should that person also go to jail for 10 years for such an honest mistake?
No. I am sure the court. I want to believe the courts will understand that. Will put the interpretation of the law into context. But look at the obvious things which happen. There are people who have specialized on hate speech, on government, on individuals, and on companies. It has gone even beyond politics to businesses.
What is wrong with promoting hate speech against the government? The whole idea in the democratic society, if I want President Museveni to be elected out of office, it's my responsibility to make the public of Uganda hate him, so they vote him out. So to ban hate speech against the government or the president is to ban democratic practice.
Criticize his policies.
And make people hate him because he's
policies, but don't go to Museveni as a person.
Honorable Misuse.
But his personality, the personality of a political leader is an important component of judgment.
Honorable Misuse, let me give you a live example.
You know, for us, we have been publishing things of Bobby Wine smoking weed. Should we also go to jail for that?
By the way, you shouldn't be doing that.
Why?
That has nothing to do with his political ambition.
Honorable Misuse.
It has everything.
Yes.
Your personal character
Andrew, hold it a moment.
strong bearing.
Andrew, hold it a moment.
On your public office.
Andrew, hold it a moment. Honorable Misuse. President Donald Trump built his political career largely by promoting the birther accusation against President Barack Obama when he was president. And as a result, President Trump rose in popularity and was able to enter White House. Now he's out of White House, he's been banned from Twitter, and life is continuing as normal. Why is the Uganda government and you public officials so paranoid about being criticized or being attacked? You make these comments in private meetings in Rwanda, for example. Someone records you talking and shares that, and you say, this person is spreading false news against me. And because you're a powerful minister, they get him arrested before they can plead and say, you know, this information.
No. You just go slow about it. I want you to look at this law again. If you record me and you have evidence, there is no problem. As long as you can prove what you are writing, the law will protect you.
Honorable Minister.
But should you decide to do propaganda?
You are the acting Minister for Finance.
Yes.
There have been stories about stolen parish development model monies.
Yes.
Before I am able to verify, or court is able to prove that my information is solid, would I still be functioning?
Yes.
That I have run a story, parish development money has been stolen.
Minister of Finance has stolen parish development model money.
Minister of Finance is saying publishing information about me without evidence.
But that
I want to
wait for the court.
Yes, the court will have
you
to.
To be punished. But me, I wanted to make a different point, Honorable Misuse.
Yes.
You see, I'm a public person, a journalist. I have made my career criticizing others, so I feel I should not be given exemption from criticism. My grandson Tamale Mirundi has been on television, radio, everywhere saying I trade in human body parts. I have never responded. I have never even reported him to police. I'm every day attacked, even on my own newspaper in the Independent, or my own social media platforms, like on my page on Facebook. But I feel like as a public person in the media, I should be subjected to ferocious criticism, even unfair criticism, because I should not be the one to determine this. Even you as a public official, and this is what I appeal to public officials of Uganda. I think once you take a public job, your personality, your character, your conduct, even at a private level, must be subjected to public scrutiny. If you don't want to, if you can't stand the heat, don't go to the kitchen. If you don't want public scrutiny, don't become a public official. Now, if you brought Nsereko, who is a private citizen in Uganda, and he has been subjected to either invasion of his privacy, or that is a person I would like to be protected. But I don't want this law to protect politicians and other public officials.
Well, are you allowing Andrew to say that this law is meant specifically to protect people in government offices, in public offices?
No.
So his argument is really
the entire spectrum.
Is really superfluous.
You see,
This law is
well,
not
I need to
protecting
bring
government
Honorable
officials.
Flavia Nabagala into this.
As she does. Nearly most of the offenses about publication in the penal code, they looked at the members of society of sound mind. The Honorable Misuse and promoters of this law think the public is so stupid that everything that is put here is going to be believed. And that's why they are going to be hunting down people every day. But at least in the past, when you have been charged as a journalist, you have a burden to prove that the people of sound mind believed, because they're not going to believe everything. All that is now being removed. That everything that is published now, it is
the thing that the minister was talking about, that if you announce me dead when I'm not dead, people will believe that you're dead. And then you imagine you're doing your business and people are watching you and they say, hey, but this man, they said he's dead, so is he actually dead? Honorable Nabagala, let me come to you. A quick comment on this Computer Misuse Now Act.
No, thank you very much, Charles. I actually didn't know that there would come a day when I would agree with Andrew on some issues. But today he seems to be speaking my language, which I am really proud of today, because this law, first of all, was very unnecessary, because we also have other laws that have certain crimes that you are mentioned in this law. It was already unnecessary. Just like the POMA, it has also come in to restrict further the already shrinking civic space and engagement space on the rights of freedom, curtailing the rights of freedom, expression, and all those things, like you've mentioned it, like the previous, like some of the panelists have been mentioning here. So I personally think it is one of those laws that has come in to further entrench and curb the criticism from political activists, especially to their leaders. We all know that social media is one of the digitalized platforms which we can all use as a country. I mean, we are moving forward, and this is the era where we need to move forward. And Uganda, on first of all restricting the space on social media like Facebook, it is now further, looking for witch hunting, if I may call it, witch hunting political activists that are very vocal in criticizing government officials, but also government programs. For example, in NUP we are under attack actually, because most of our people have been identified by the things they say on Facebook. And just like Andrew was saying, if the public officials are there and they are servants of Ugandans, then why are they so afraid of Ugandans critiquing what they do? Because that is where the whole question is. And it's about freedom of speech. People are free to crack whichever jokes they want and are free to exchange ideas, even on social media platforms, without worrying about who is looking for them, who is hunting them down, without using pseudonyms, without hiding from the officials and things like that. So I think for me, this law, Nsereko Act, was really unnecessary. It is really something that has come in further to entrench Ugandans into a deeper state that is already disrupted by everything. I don't see a reason people have always made a fuss and made all these allegations and allusions to how officials behave and work. And we have been there. Do they want us to go into Rwanda right now? But even if this law is there, I'm telling you that the opposition, we are not going to shut up. We are not going to keep quiet. We are not going to be cowed down by this law. We shall critique what we have to critique. We shall say what we have to say. And we will continue exposing the rot in the...
Thank you very much. We need to move on and discuss whether government is getting its priorities right in dealing with the economy. I want to start with the Minister and come back to you. On this
economy.
Yes, the state of the economy. What is the state of the economy that you're presiding over, Honorable Minister?
Well, what is the state of the economy? Ideally, you are asking me to tell you about the health of our economy at the moment. And we measure this by looking at mainly 4 macroeconomic fundamentals. One is economic growth by looking at the GDP. 2 is the price stability. Number 3 is employment. If I may look at what is happening now.
Number 4, you stopped at number 3.
Number 4 is I've told you about economic growth. I've told you about the price stability. I've told you about, I think the 4th is interest rates. What is happening now? The global economy was hit by 3 major factors.
Honorable Minister, I asked you about the state of the economy you preside over, the Ugandan economy.
Can you give me time to answer your question? The economy was hit by 3 major factors.
The global
COVID,
economy?
Yes. The COVID, the slowness in the growth, and also climatic change. Our economy was not spared. And we have seen from May to date, we have seen interest rates rising. No, inflation going up. From single, now we are talking about 10%,
double digit.
Which is double digit. Once this happens, we cannot just sit back. We have to deal with inflation, because for us what we regard as normal inflation is when it is between 5% and below. 10% is not good news for us, and we have to deal with that. The Bank of Uganda, by applying monetary policy, has had to do some measures to the parishes. You have seen us focusing more on agriculture.
Honorable Minister, if you could just pause it there. I've also seen a lot of letters from chief administrative officers and accounting officers in districts communicating to teachers that their salaries would be delayed, or other public servants. Isn't that a contradiction, that you're releasing money to go into PDM, but you're not paying public workers? And that you say you're doing that to contain inflation?
You see, when you see such a thing, the first point of clarification should be from us, because what you are saying is not exactly what happened.
What happened?
What happened was we released the money for first quarter for wage without taking into account that there had been some adjustments which required more money. They paid July, they paid August, and we realized that they were going to have a shortfall in September. We immediately intervened and gave them extra 101 100.6 billion to take care of the shortfall. As I speak now, there is no civil servant in government who has not received September.
But you just told our viewers and the panelists here that you did not send the money because you basically held it back, and you actually said it at the ministry in a press conference. You said government is not broke.
The good thing,
just holding the money because
the
we don't
good
want
thing
to.
I'm here, and I'm going to give you all the answers. I have just said we didn't release all the money.
Why?
Why? Because we needed to respond to the situation which was happening. We needed to...
And which was that situation?
Inflation.
So you had the money.
Yeah.
You had the money, but you held it back.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And what ill were you trying to prevent?
I don't get
what problem were you trying to deal with to prevent inflation?
We were trying to deal with inflation.
Yes.
But
and then
can you
the same you clicked the button sending money for PDM.
Yes.
Is that a contradiction?
No, it is not. Why it is not a contradiction? We are saying even when there is inflation, where is it coming from? The inflation we are experiencing today is largely imported inflation. It is coming from those things which we import outside our economy. To deal with it, to buy seedlings for agriculture.
For which season, sir?
I am here today.
No, with that
there is a season.
I am asking you which season.
There is a season.
So this one is finished, it's gone.
This season is finished. There is
and
another
sending
season.
Money to buy seedlings.
There is another season coming up in January. Yes.
I'm
telling you.
Have you sent money, PDM money to Chazanga?
Yes.
You expect people who are starving, they don't have food, to buy seedlings?
To keep them till January.
Keep them till January?
No, let me tell you. By the way, when you go to Chigezi, now, in Rwanda, where I come from, people are planting. If you give them seedlings now, they will plant. And I'm sure in many other parts of the country.
No.
Yes.
At least in Uganda, and I move here a lot, planting ended. But the rains have failed.
If the rains have failed, do we sit back?
You send money for seedlings.
At the same time, we are investing in irrigation. Yes, because where there is persistent failure of rains, we must have a long-term solution. And the solution is in irrigation. Look at our budget for irrigation and see what we have put there.
How much?
And that money has been...
Andrew, I know you are itching to say something.
Yes.
Please hold it a moment.
So...
hold your horses.
I want to... What is it?
What have you said for you to be asked another question?
We're giving you, I think we're collectively giving you a lot of time to explain where we are. Because that's what is the state of the economy you're presiding over? And you've gone through an explanation. I'm listening. And to hear you exactly tell us, in conclusion, the state of the Ugandan economy is ABCD, and these are the interventions. Because you told me that you decided as government to hold back release of money to do public works, public activities, the quota releases, because you wanted to contain inflation. But at the same time, you're sending money for PDM.
Productive sectors. And also, I'm sure you are aware that when we don't pay certificates, the private sector will struggle. We also release the money for certificates, for arrears, so that suppliers of government can be paid.
So, how does that contain inflation?
You see, there are a number of fundamentals to deal with. We are not only looking at inflation. We are looking at the overall economy. We are looking at economic growth. The economy must continue growing. it must continue responding.
At what percentage is this economy growing?
We closed last financial year at 4.6%. Our projection in the budget speech was 6%. That was before we were seriously hit by this inflation. Now we expect, because of the inflation which has hit us, we expect to grow at 5%.
5%?
Yes.
So better than?
By end of June.
Better than the close.
Yes.
Andrew, I need you to come in here. I know you spend a lot of time reading these economics things. What sense are you making of the minister's explanation?
Well, you see, I do not disagree with the minister, just disagree with the overall government policy on controlling inflation. You see, the minister stated a very important point, that a significant component of Uganda's current inflation is imported inflation. And it is in the three areas. One, there has been the appreciation of the dollar to the shilling. The second has been the increase in the price of fuel. The third, I think because of delays caused by the disruption of global supply chains, things are delaying to reach Uganda. That has increased prices. The third is the increased cost of transportation of goods from different parts. To move a container from China to Mombasa used to cost, say, $3,000. Now it's costing about $10,000. Things have gone up 3 times. So you have a huge part of Uganda's inflation being caused by factors outside of Uganda's control and beyond Uganda's, outside of Uganda's borders. Now, government of Uganda in the first quarter of this financial year, the Ministry of Finance withheld 4 trillion shillings from spending in order to control inflation. And at that time, I think the inflation was 7.9%. The government said, no, inflation is going high, so we're going to restrict supplying money. 2, the Bank of Uganda decided to buy out of circulation using treasury bonds. A treasury bond, a 10-year bond, now you can buy it at 18.5%. They said we are going to use a monetary tool of sucking money out of circulation, about 1.8 trillion, we will buy it out of circulation. The Ministry of Finance withheld 4 trillion. That is 5.8 trillion, roughly 6 trillion withheld. I disagree with the government at 2 levels. You see, normally in economics we say that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. Inflation is a persistent increase in the general price level, right? And it's largely caused by too much money running after few goods. Now, if you increase money supply and it exceeds the level of economic activity in the economy, there will be an upward pressure on price. To control that, is use both monetary and fiscal tools to control money supply. So either government can buy money out of circulation using treasury bills and bonds, or the Ministry of Finance can withhold spending so that you don't pump more money into the economy. For me, the question is, if your inflation is being imported, how does tightening monetary tools and tightening fiscal tools stop inflation? Because how does you refuse withholding 4 trillion from spending in the economy stop the cost of fuel, stop the cost of the dollar and all these other factors? I don't see how. So that is the first criticism I have of government policy, that you are dealing with largely imported inflation, but you are employing traditional monetary and fiscal tools of monetary supply, of controlling monetary supply to respond to an external problem. I want economists to come here and explain to me how that makes sense. Just 1 second, that is part 1. The second part, of course, is overall government policy of Uganda. Government policy in Uganda is that inflation should not exceed 5%. That has moved from being a macroeconomic policy principle to becoming a macroeconomic policy fetish. And I think one of the reasons they are using this tight monetary and fiscal control in these circumstances, and it's really harming the economy. I am sure if you go to organizations like UNRWA, you go to KCCA, you go to practically every government department, in the first quarter they paid only salaries. They don't release money for construction of roads, maintenance of roads, performance of many basic public services have been installed in order to control inflation. It has become a fetish. First of all, there is a paper.
And the reward out of that is that inflation has doubled to double digit.
Exactly. Well, they could say it has increased from 7.9 to 10.1% now. Maybe it would have gone to 20. We don't know. But for me, the question is, if it is imported inflation, how does your tight monetary and fiscal control stop those external factors that are driving prices up. Because if the problem was internal monetary expansion, I can understand why you stop monetary expansion by fiscal and these monetary tools. But if it's imported, how does these monetary measures control inflation? So that is point number one. The point number two, I wanted to come to these issues of the drought and it driving inflation or creating famine in Uganda. Please, people should know that famine is a political problem. It's not a natural problem. Drought is a natural condition characterized by insufficiency of rain leading to crop failure. But the transition from this natural phenomenon, which is drought, to famine, which is a political problem, is characterized by the interplay between a natural phenomenon and public policies that manage the relationship between rainfall and crop failure. For instance, if you have robust agricultural policies with institutions to implement those policies, you can predict droughts, or you can have systems for irrigation, you can have silos where you store food. There are so many public policies that can be in place to ensure that even when you have a drought for 6 years, you still have a bump harvest or enough food stored. You know, America has had a drought in many parts for the last 6 years, and they don't have food shortage. So after 40 years, I don't think NRM has any excuse whatsoever to say that it is either Obote or Idi Amin or whoever who has made it difficult for the government to have in place policies for food storage, which we call for food security, food storage, or policies for irrigation, or policies for that matter for importation of food in the case of droughts.
And sometimes, if I might add, policies to move food from areas that have food, areas that have
yes. So even this issue of food scarcity is a failure of both public policies and political institutions that are supposed to manage the relationship between rainfall and crop failure. So now the final point I want to make about inflation is that overall government of Uganda is right to say we need to control inflation, but when that becomes a fetish, you miss the point. There is a study I was
What is a fetish?
Can you go on Google and find out what a fetish is? But it is a kind of, it has become it has become a kind of religious creed, a kind of cult
obsession, beyond an obsession.
An obsessive cult-like belief in something that you cannot even subject it to empirical verification. There is a study done by Professor William Easterly and Michael Bruno. Michael Bruno was chief economic solution, and they actually found that inflation below 40%, there is no evidence that inflation above 40%, rather inflation below 40% is not injurious to growth. So inflation becomes dangerous for you if it begins to exceed 40%. Now I'm thinking that 40% is too high. But I can give an example. During the South Asia's intense period of economic transformation from a peasant economy to an industrial economy, 1960 to 1990, the average rate of inflation was 19%. If you look at Brazil between 1955 and 1985, when it had the fastest rates of growth, its inflation rate was about 20%. So this idea that regardless of all circumstances, inflation must be controlled at 5%. It has become a fetish.
Thank you.
Hold a second, Charles. It has become a fetish. In these circumstances, I think that there are moments, given specific circumstances, when we should break the rule of 5% and allow inflation to reach even 20%.
I think there was a time there was a discussion about that in government. The president talked about it, to allow inflation to get into double digit, thinking that would, in a way, stimulate growth.
And I should also tell you that if you allow inflation to reach that level, if it's driven by monetary policy, of course, you will have divided the government debt, and you will make it cheaper for government to pay debt using inflation. But that's
I'm afraid we need to take a quick commercial break. Someone was joking, actually, one of our listeners, one of our viewers, was joking and saying, inflation is getting out of hand. Did the late Professor Emmanuel Tumsime Mtebele go with the password to dealing with inflation? Because he had better ways to deal with sometimes. And I'm sure that person is actually watching us now. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick it up with Honorable Ssemujju, Ofonopondo, and the Honorable